Towards the end of last year, Christopher Ward released a new version of its hugely successful Bel Canto. That's a watch I really wanted to add to my collection. This is a Bel Canto Classic, and there are a few differences compared to the original. Stay tuned and I'll tell you what's new, as well as something that nobody else seems to be talking about. Together with the 12, the Bel Canto has been one of the watches that catapulted Christopher Ward to new heights, figuratively speaking. Well, actually, in sales figures too. In the financial year prior to the release of the Bel Canto, Christopher Ward had posted record annual revenues of £13.6 million. However, things changed a little when they released the Bel Canto. You see, they originally intended to make 600 units, but those 600 sold out within a matter of hours. So they geared up production. In fact, they scaled it up tenfold. And in the year 2024 to 2025, they expect to sell 6,000. And that means that their turnover will probably hit 50 million. To capitalise on their success, Christopher Ward clearly intends to take their smash hit Bel Canto and turn it into a collection, almost a product category of its own, in the hope that more SKUs will lead to more sales. This Bel Canto Classic is the first evidence we've seen of that, but I don't think it'll be the last. It features many of the same attributes as the original. It has a 41mm case machined from grade 5 titanium, so the watch head weighs just 53 grams. Along with a lug-to-lug measurement of 48mm, it makes it super wearable. However, one measurement that Christopher Ward tends not to dwell on is the thickness. But we'll come back to that one later. It is, of course, a chiming watch. It's powered by Christopher Ward's FS01 movement, which uses a Sleater SW200-1 as a base movement, with their proprietary chiming complication on top of this. And it's mounted on a platine just under the dial, so you get to see it, which is rather nice. It has a closed case back, mainly to amplify the chiming sound when this little hammer strikes on the fork. It strikes on the hour, and it's been tuned to chime in the key of D, but you can turn off the chime with a little button on the side of the case, if you're in a library, an important meeting, or if you just want to get a good night's sleep. This one was sent to me on this grade 2 titanium bracelet, which is really nicely finished, and it's super light. But it's also available on a strap, and I think that really a watch like this really belongs on a strap. So when it comes to the differences between this and the original, they're purely aesthetic. Most obvious among them is this guilloche finishing on the platine that sits below the chiming mechanism and the elevated dial. The dial is mounted atop these arched bridges. That guilloche work is seriously impressive, as is the finishing on all of the parts you get to see on this very three-dimensional dial. And that's one of the things that the brand is rightly proud of. The early Bel Cantos were finished by hand, but in order to ramp up production, they had to find a way to achieve a similar level of finishing by machine. Hand finishing would never be viable at these volumes, or indeed on a watch of this price. The solution came by way of a partner who could offer precise laser finishing, and, just like the Remington shaver adverts used to say back in the 80s, they liked it so much, they bought the company. The more beady-eyed among you will also notice that the hour markers are different here too. Where the original had battens, this classic has Roman numerals, making it look, well, more classical. Last but not least, there's a new, taller and more sharply boxed sapphire crystal, which the good folks at Christopher Ward say was necessary to give some extra height clearance for that floating dial. The price of this classic here in the UK is just a shade under £3,500 on a leather strap, and a little over £3,500 on this bracelet. Now, that's a few £100 or a few $100 more than the original Bel Canto, but I think it's a pretty modest uplift, especially considering the amount of extra finishing that's going into this. But is it a better watch, and does it make me want a Bel Canto even more? Well, as I've said, the changes are mostly aesthetic, and design is broadly subjective. I mean, what I might like might not float your boat. Personally, I love that gear-shaped platine, but aesthetically the classic dial, and especially those Roman numerals, well, I'm not sure they really work on what is a very modern-looking watch. It feels like a mashup of ideas, rather than a harmonious design. Then there's that new crystal. Now, I was at the launch of the original Bel Canto, and I haven't actually had one of those on my wrist since then. But I don't remember it feeling this thick. Now, I couldn't actually find the thickness listed in the specifications on the Christopher Ward website, and I think I might know why. Now, at times like this, Google is your friend, and I found a couple of reviews of the original Bel Canto, where the thickness was stated as 13mm. However, I measure this new Bel Canto Classic as being 14mm. Now, okay, what's 1mm between friends, I hear you say? Well, I know it's only a millimetre, but actually, I think it matters. After all, this is a watch that was designed to be worn at the opera or at the office, rather than on the beach. And at 14mm, it's gonna struggle to slip neatly under a shirt cuff. But look, overall, I love the Bel Canto, and big props to Christopher Ward for being innovative and really pushing the boundaries in terms of what's achievable at this kind of price range. I certainly hope they continue in that vein, and I'm excited to see where the brand goes next. But given the choice, I would still have the original Bel Canto, and preferably with a blue dial, please. But I'd love to know what you think, so please do comment below. Do you like this new Bel Canto Classic, or like me, do you prefer the original? As ever, if you've enjoyed this video, then please do hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, particularly as we have some hugely exciting things coming up in 2025. And guys, I'll see you on the next one.